Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. This is actually the second video that I'm recording today. I probably will have posted my fiction video this week on sometime earlier in the week. I'm guessing it'll probably go up either Tuesday night or Wednesday, with this video probably going up Friday or Saturday. So we shall see. They will be split up, though. This time around, I think I've done a lot more nonfiction reading than I've done fiction reading, which lately has kind of been my tendency. If I have murder mysteries, especially Golden Age murder mysteries I'm reading, I will pop off one after another, but lately my tendency has been a bit more nonfiction. And a couple of these were surprise. Well, at least one of them was kind of a surprise to me because I didn't intend on reading it. It came up when I was wish listing things on Amazon and it caught my interest, and so I picked it up. So first I'm going to actually cover the ones that were ones that I finished that I had already been reading, or the one that I finished that I was already reading. I was reading, it's more of a memoir. It's called Down Among the Dead Men by Michelle Williams. I gave this one about a 4.5 stars on Storygraph. This was a book about a lady who ended up becoming a mortuary assistant. I don't think she was a technician, I think she was an assistant. In a mortuary attached to a hospital in England. I forget where in England that she was. So besides giving you little inputs into her life, it covers a lot of what it was like to be a mortuary assistant at this hospital at that time and to learn the ropes and all that. So I found it an interesting read. There were points where I found like it maybe diverged more from the focus on mortuary that I liked. There were points where I didn't really care about what was going on with her personal life. I wanted to get back to the mortuary. But that was probably just me, and once I chilled out a little bit, I was able to enjoy those parts too. But I did find that an interesting read, just because it makes you think about things that you might not have otherwise thought of, because we had like a miniature place where bodies could be stored at the hospital I worked at, but I very rarely ever went down there because nurses could not be spared from the floor ICU, really. And usually the funeral home would come and pick up the deceased directly from the floor or from the ICU. So it really wasn't something that I had to see a whole lot of. So I did find that interesting. I did find very interesting the way that they would, besides dealing with families that are grieving, which is something that I did also have to see in my field, but how they would prepare the bodies to be presentable, and things about, besides the autopsies, the, what are the hearings? You see them all the time in murder mysteries. Bless it all. Anyway, it's the hearing where they determine whether or not this was suicide, accident, murder, natural death. I know the word, but it won't come to me right now. Oh, it was right there and it went away. Okay, I'll remember it some other point. So I did find that quite interesting. Then I ended up finding at the library and reading, it's called a book called Daughter, Doctor, Resurrectionist, and it's by Edmund Michael van Buskirk. This gentleman, he comes from a line of doctors, and he also is a doctor. I don't know what his focus is, what his specialty is, but he has in his family history a doctor who, I think it was either his grandfather or great-grandfather, who had made use of resurrectionists to provide bodies for dissection. And this was a big issue both in England, where you have, I think it's Burke and Hare, who ended up murdering people to provide bodies to to medical schools for dissection. This was not something that, of course, the medical schools were like, yeah, murder people. But that was just how Burke and Hare went around doing that. One of them got hung, the other one did a plea bargain. And because of that time, if you were hung, if you were a criminal, your body got donated to dissection. The Resurrectionist, who was hung, his body got donated for dissection, which is full circle, it feels. Anyway, wait, it just feels appropriate. Anyhow, that's not what Dr. Resurrectionist is about. That is a different book that I will read at some point. I do have at least one book on Burke and Hare. But Dr. Resurrectionist, like I said, is about this one doctor, Van Buskirk. He was during a time period where medical schools were still fairly new, and the only way to really get practice was to have bodies to dissect. They didn't have a great knowledge. I think some people were still, the older doctors who had been trained in more of an apprenticeship, they were still working off the humor theory. So they were still going with Galen. So by the time you started seeing medical schools, it was still you're still pretty rustic. You're still pretty much like, okay, I don't know a whole lot what I'm talking about. Let's go dissect some bodies. And because there were not enough people who were willing to donate their bodies to science, what you would find is once they ran out of criminals, they would end up having to find bodies elsewhere. A lot of times it would end up people who were who were buried in potter's fields, or who were homeless or whatever. Their bodies would often get taken, and people would kind of look the other way until they started seeing bodies taken from other people in the community, and then people would start putting guards on their family members' tombs for like the first couple days until the body became unusable for resurrectionists or for the medical students, because they needed bodies to be fresh. Because once you've reached a certain point of decompensation, yeah, I can speak. Once you've decompensated, there we go, to a certain point, the body is no longer usable for dissection. So they would try to have a guard over the tomb for a certain period of time, so then the body would not be useful for dissection anymore. But resurrectionists, the people it was their job to steal bodies for the medical schools, and the doctors would then pay for those bodies. Usually the doctors were not personally going and unburying the bodies, though sometimes you would see students do that. They were actually professional resurrectionists. The resurrectionists would either bribe guards or just figure out what the system was to work around the guards, rotation around the graveyard if they were not posted to one particular grave. They would figure out ways to, like if there was a certain seal, like a mark in the ground, placed to show that, okay, if this mark is messed up and someone's stolen a body, they would try to replicate those marks. They were kind of sneaky about it. So this covers a particular doctor who got caught and what led him to the point where he did feel the need to have bodies stolen for his students, and then what happened to him afterwards, and then how the resurrectionist heyday kind of came to an end. So it's an interesting book. I do recommend it as a read. I think that one on Burke and Hare would be even more interesting, but this one was an interesting read. I gave it about 4 stars just because it wasn't necessarily something that really grabbed me stylistically in the way it was written, even though it was interesting. Now, one of my finished books that I really enjoyed, and this was one that I didn't anticipate even reading. I read this in less than 12 hours. Maybe a little bit more, maybe like 16. Anyway, I read this in one sitting. The book was one that was recommended to me on Amazon. It's called John Adams Under Fire, The Founding Fathers Fight for Justice in the Boston Massacre Murder Trial. And it's by Dan Abrams and David Fisher. I'm looking at notes down here, which is why I'm looking down. I gave this one 5 stars. So I was not aware of what the premise of this book was, but I wasn't aware of the events that happened in this book. Of course, we all, if we're aware of American history, we know about the Boston Massacre. But I was not aware of the trials that took place after the Boston Massacre. And John Adams did something that was very controversial at the time, which was he made a bid to make America's justice system innocent until proven guilty. And he chose to make sure that the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre had appropriate representation so that they just didn't get lynched somewhere. He wanted to make sure that it wasn't about these particular men. It was about America's justice system. So it was a very interesting read. I ended up coming away with quite a respect for John Adams as someone who put the future of law and of human rights to be represented before his personal opinions as an American, as someone who really did not believe that the British had a right to be there in that circumstance. So I really had a respect for him. I also lost a lot of respect for Samuel Adams, who just came off as a obnoxious jerk to me, because he absolutely didn't care about what evidence said or whatever. He just wanted to basically lynch these guys, and he was constantly trying to feed the fire of people's fanaticism and wanting to keep them angry and basically taint the jury pool. So I really came off with a nasty taste in my mouth about Sam Adams. Lost a lot of respect for him, but gained a lot for John Adams. So it was. I found this a very interesting read and would highly recommend it. It gave a very different. It made me think more about incidents in American history that I really had not given hardly any thought to at all. So, very good book, John Adams Under Fire. What I am currently reading. Well, I am currently reading an 800 plus page tome on Washington. It's called Washington of Life. It's on my Kindle. I'm only like 30% through. I actually had to get the book because I was about to lose my loan in the library, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to renew it if someone else had it on hold, and I wasn't going to rush reading this book. So, Washington Life by Ron Chernow. He's the one who's famous for writing the Alexander Hamilton book on which the musical Hamilton was based. I am thoroughly enjoying Washington Life. It's very in-depth on Washington. I'm finding out things about the Revolutionary War that I really wasn't aware of. I feel like I'm getting a really nuanced view of the personalities involved, and not just Washington's personality, a lot of personalities involved. It's helped me get interested in the Revolutionary War in a way I never have before, because I've always preferred English history, particularly Middle Age to about Tudor, maybe as late as Victorian history. So this is completely new for me to be this interested in American history. And I'm just thoroughly enjoying this book on Washington. I don't really want to rush the experience, but I also have things behind it that I want to read, so I need to pick up the pace a little bit, even though I don't want to rush through it. Now, one I definitely don't want to rush through has been my favorite book that I'm reading at this time. Okay, so preface to this, I started my career as a nurse when I was still able to be a nurse. I started my career as a nurse as a cardiac nurse. I was kind of thrown trial by fire on a cardiac telemetry floor where you had people coding. You could have multiple codes a 12-hour shift. if you were so unlucky. So it was a very interesting experience. I learned a lot. Lifelong love of reading cardiac telemetry from that. But this preface leads into part of why I enjoy this book so much. This is called The Heart Healers. The misfits, mavericks, and rebels who created the greatest medical breakthroughs of our lives. This is by James S. Forrester, MD. And you would not believe this, perhaps, about a book on the history of cardiac medicine, but this thing is hilarious. Some of these things that these doctors would do, it's just like, what, you nuts? From the guy who, when he was trying to, what was he trying to do? I think it wasn't for tetralogy of Fallot. I think he was trying to help with heart block. Or no, I think he was trying to do valve replacement, something like that. I can't remember now. But he had killed, not on purpose, but a lot of times what you find with these doctors, while they were trying things out, these would be patients that weren't expected to survive. And you would find that before they hit the solution, there would be patients who died beforehand. And this guy had up to 10 people who died, to the point where, like, they were saying, okay, man, you're not allowed to practice, take care of patients anymore at this hospital. You've lost your surgical rights. And you go from hospital to hospital. And he was down to, like, the last 2 hospitals in his area that didn't know his reputation. So this man, rules did not apply to him, apparently. He scheduled 2 surgeries back to back, one at one hospital, one at the other, same day, so that way if his patient died at the first surgery, he could quickly drive over to the next hospital and do that surgery before word got out about the other surgery. So thankfully, that last surgery worked out, and it was a medical breakthrough. But yes, these are the kind of people who were the kind of rules don't apply to me, taking chances type people who you would look at them if you were working with them and be like, you're nuts and dangerous and probably don't need to be in medicine. But these were the people that we needed at this time to take us where we are right now in cardiac medicine. The things we would not have, we would not be able to fit, congenital heart disease would still be something that would be unfixable if it was not for some of these doctors. You would still have people dying from valve issues because they would not be able to replace valves. You would have people dying from heart block with no potential of having that fixed. No pacemakers, no heart-lung machine, no CPR, no heart catheterizations. There would be no open heart surgery. There would be so many things that we would not have except for these crazy, off-the-wall, rules don't apply to me doctors who took a chance, whose patients were willing to take a chance either because they knew they wouldn't survive, or their parents, unfortunately, in some cases these were kids, their parents knew that they wouldn't survive, and they just were willing to take the chance that their child might make it with an experimental treatment. And sometimes they did, and unfortunately sometimes they didn't. But this is an amazing book. You have a doctor who kept his patient alive literally by squeezing the heart until they could get, defibrillator. The first defibrillator over. That was at that point only used on dogs, but he really did not want his 12-year-old patient to die. So he's sitting there manually squeezing the heart so that way his patient can have blood flow to his brain until they could get the pads to him. And and this is pad placement, sorry, to him in time to possibly save his life. And it was one of those things that it wasn't something he was planning on doing. It was just like, I got to do something. Get those pads that they were using on that dog the other day that was in testing. Let's just do it now. And he sat there squeezing that heart for like, I think they said like an hour and a half. He could not close his hand when he was done. But the kid survived, and he had no brain damage. So those are the kind of things that you're seeing in this. You have the guy who he was told, absolutely do not put a tube into someone's heart. You're crazy nuts. I will not, let you do that. Can I put a tube in my own? No. So he's like, okay, I won't do that then. Flirts with the nurse, gets her to work with him, and then he goes ahead and he puts a tube in his own arm, and voila, cardiac catheterization is born. He literally had to kick shins and fight people to get them to let him continue what he was doing. Yeah, these guys are insane. This is so awesome. I love this book so much. I cannot say enough good things about it. I just love it. Ooh, are we talking about Cabbage now? Sorry, Cabbage is coronary artery bypass graft. And we used to have Cabbage patients all the time, although I didn't see them post-surgically. I would prep them for caths, and sometimes I would have to prep for cabbages. But usually Cabbage would only happen if it would only be on my floor and have a Cabbage if things went horribly wrong. I didn't get those patients usually, unless I transferred over to that end of cardiac floor. But yeah, fascinating. Yes, fascinating and funny. Really great. And he does the rest of the story thing that what's his name does. It was a book. It was and the rest of the story I can't remember. My dad used to read that book to my sister and I when we were kids, where the guy would tell a story, and then he'd say, and the rest of the story, but I can't remember, and it's not going to come to my mind. But good book, The Heart Healers. Now, my to be read. Well, it's another physical book here, but I'm not allowed to read this until I'm done with Washington. So say I. Let's see if I can stick to it. I am not a monogamous reader. I'm a polygamous reader. I'm a horrible person. Anyway. Tragedy of Benedict Arnold. It was less expensive to pick this up as a physical hardcover than it was as a Kindle book. So obviously I picked this up as a physical hardcover. This was a library book. Brooklyn Public Library. I don't have a library card section, though. Probably because this was after library cards were discontinued, because I guess I'm old now, because I remember when library cards were a thing. But this is a fairly short book for a history book. It's only 300-some pages. I'm used to, 800-page history books. But I look forward to reading this because I'm not terribly familiar with Benedict Arnold, other than the obvious, betrayed America thing. But about him as a man, no, I really don't know a whole lot about him. So I'm very interested in this. I also want to read, but it has to wait till after Benedict Arnold, is a book I found on Kindle. It's called Adopted Son, Washington, Lafayette, and the Friendship That Saved the Revolution. And apparently Washington and Lafayette were very close. Lafayette was 19 when he came over. And he seemed to have a lot of hero worship for Washington. Washington thought a lot of him. And I'm just really interested in a book on that relationship. It's being covered a little bit right now in Washington, a Life that I'm reading, but I'm interested in a book that focuses on this relationship. And the book is by David A. Clary. The other one I'm interested in, it's another John Adams book, which makes me seem like a psycho-obsessed person. But it's actually, now that I think about it, the one above it makes me seem like I'm obsessed with Washington. So, whatever. Friends Divided, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And this is by Gordon S. Wood. And it sounds like they almost had, maybe not as bad, but like almost had Jefferson-Hamilton relationship. Which, did Jefferson have any confrontational relationships? I don't know. I'll have to look into that. Because, now granted, John Adams sounds like he was a bit of a curmudgeon sometimes. But, I'm interested in reading that. It sounds like they just had a very interesting dynamic. And then finally on my TBR for, I guess these are all history pretty much. TBR is The Icepick Surgeon. The full title is The Icepick Surgeon. I guess I am getting my Kindle out. Icepick Surgeon, Murder, Fraud, Sabotage, Piracy, and Other Dastardly Dastardly Deeds. Sorry, I had to go back to the cover page because it disappeared on me. Okay, so Icepick Surgeon, Murder, Fraud, Sabotage, Piracy, and Other Dastardly Deeds Perpetrated in the Name of Science. And it's by Sam Keene. And I've been wanting to read this for a while. I've had this for a while, but I just have never gotten around to reading it. So this is definitely on my to-do. You might recognize this if you watch The Chronic Reader, because she has this in her background. It's usually, I think it's off to her... I'm right and left impaired. It's off somewhere here, I think. When it's behind her on her shelf when she talks. But yeah, I've had this for a while. Wanted to read this for a while because I know that there is a lot of Icepick Surgeon. That was there was a guy who was super duper dramatic and really dangerous in the way that he would perform. It was lobotomies, and I listened to a really cool NPR thing about lobotomies, and they were talking to one kid who was lobotomized, one of the last guys who was lobotomized by this one doctor. And the guy who, I guess, really ended up making popular lobotomy was this guy who he literally would have like these, I guess they're ice pick scalpels. And he would just be all dramatic and then go right in. He almost made it more of a show than anything else. And some people claimed he really helped them. Some people got seriously damaged by him. The period where they were just doing lobotomies for everything from postpartum depression to my kid is a bit hard to handle to I can't stand my kid. Please just do something to him. This actually happened to the one kid that I was talking about from the NPR thing, where his stepmom really didn't like him, so she took him to be lobotomized. And yeah, it did end up affecting his life. Thankfully, he was able to end up driving a bus later in life, but yeah, he always wonders what it would have been like if he had not been lobotomized. But the fact that there was no standards really for what lobotomy was, what lobotomy was done for. There were some people like, oh yeah, it really helped my family member's suicidality. But there were other people who were like, yeah, my family member came out and they were basically a vegetable. So there were too many these are the situations. Okay, to compare the Icepick lobotomies to this, very different, because there was no studies going into it. There was no like, okay, so this didn't work, let's try something else. There was no learning from the experience. There was like, this is what we do. You got depression, come on over here. You got hysteria, yeah, we'll lobotomize you. You're a little bit difficult to deal with. Let's stick a scalpel in your head and take part of your brain out. Very much unlike this. So I look forward to reading that. Unfortunately, there were people who did not act responsibly with their medical power. So having overseeing bodies in medicine, even when it's frustrating and the red tape makes you want to scream, it is very important so we don't get people sticking ice pick scalpels into people's brains. But I digress. Really enjoying the books I'm reading. Really looking forward to the books that I'm gonna read. I have one coming in that's called, I think it's The Scalpel of Scotland Yard. It's a forensic, it's a forensic history book, which to me is absolutely fascinating. I heard about it from Too Fond Books. Let's see, it is 222, your orders, because this is only available in hardback, and I found like a $9 version, and I snagged it before it went away, because all the others like $30 or $73. Where are you, book? I know I purchased you. Let's see if it shows me what I looked at last. No, it's being dumb. Okay. Well, I did pick up this book. I think it's called The Scalpel of Scotland Yard. Yeah, my phone's being dumb. So, yeah, when I actually get that book, I will eventually show it. But it was recommended by Too Fond of Books. And it sounds really good. I mean, some of the people in the Amazon comments were claiming that was dry. Now, if you don't like that kind of history, maybe you would think it's dry. Personally, I'm really fascinated with medical history and history in general. So I think that it's really hard to truly determine the dryness of a book just by comments on Amazon. Why is it not showing my order on here? Oh, there it is. Oh, because it's arriving sooner than expected. Okay. So this is called, come here, The Scalpel of Scotland Yard. Yeah, the life of Sir Bernard Spilsbury. Now, apparently I will not, part of why it's down as low as it is, I guess, is because it doesn't have its dust cover. Oh no, big deal, I'll survive. This says there's no serious markings on the inside, just maybe a little bit of, wear and tear on like the back pages, but not on the writing. So that's okay. It's, as long as I can read it, it's in fairly good shape. I'll get a used book. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to Icepick Surgeon. But I'm not in a rush to finish the ones I'm reading because I'm really enjoying them. What history books are you enjoying reading? Are you interested in medical history? Or our chronic reader and I just a couple of weirdos who have odd tastes in reading? I hope you enjoy reading whatever you are reading. If you have not read medical history and it sounds like either The Heart Healers or even Icepick Surgeon are up your alley, try it. See if it's your thing. You might be surprised. All right, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm probably running way too long, so I will see you whenever I next see you. God bless. Bye-bye.